Our subject for this time is how light helps to form shapes. And I'm doing something that I've actually myself never done before. I've done a lot of reflections on water, but I really haven't worked much with reflections on shiny, hard objects like bowls. But it works so well to show how the light, which shows those objects on the bowl, help show what the shape of the bowl is. And so to do this, we need to be pretty accurate with our drawing. We want to really find out, what are these shapes doing? How are they wrapping around on the shape of this bowl? How do they change as they go up into this lip versus that little straight part versus the curve down in here? What happens when it gets down into the foot of it? How does this blue bottle reflect into there? What happens with the light on the edges of the blue bottle? And then how does the light on the draped fabric make it look like draped fabric? And then the last little piece of fun is that I have some lace in the back here, and I've been experimenting around, and I think I'm going to be able to show you guys how to do the lace without painting every little tiny detail of it. So let's see, let me go through sort of the process of my doing the drawing. So I've gone through and I've drawn where the changes are in light. So I've put hard lines in here where this changes from this lace reflection to the reflection of the back of the room, that bottle, the edge of it. So there's a lot of hard edges on something like this reflection in the bottle. There's also soft edges. So there's softness that happens in this reflection back there. There's some softness in here, but there's also a lot of hard edges. So we have to really pay attention to where those hard edges are and be pretty accurate with them. So this is my drawing. I did it in pencil first, and then I've come in with a pen to transfer it onto my watercolor paper. I was debating whether to put myself in it and decided I would, just because a lot of those reflections in here have my shape in them. And so being able to see that and see how it reflects through here is actually sort of cool. I put a mark on here where the center of my page is. So this is not on center, it's off a little bit of center. This guy's over to the side, and when I put it on the paper, I ended up moving over a little bit so I didn't have this much space over here. I realized that once I got that drawing done, I had it too pushed over to the right. So I've moved it so that there's more space on the other side of the bottle here. So that's my drawing on my watercolor paper, ready to go. And then my other thing, my last decision that we have to make is, are we really going to put this lace in here? Because if we are, I think I want to do it first. I was playing around with it. So this is the lace curtain. I have a big one. It's a cheap curtain. It was replacing something else. I had lots of it left, and I was playing around with how to get it to paint on here. I had varying degrees of success. This was using a big brush that was relatively wet, and it made just a big blurry mess. This was a little bit drier, but still with the big brush, and once again it bled underneath and made a little bit of a mess with it. Now over here I decided to try it with the paint much drier. So here the paint is pretty dark and thick, and I've still used just a regular paintbrush. But then I decided I should try, I have a little brush that's called a scrubby, and it's a fairly stiff, almost like an acrylic brush that I use for lifting with. And but he works great for doing sort of painting through. So this area right here was painted with the scrubby. So let me show you how this worked. We'll do another little section of it here. So this has to lay nice and flat, and you don't want it to move while you're working. And with the scrubby, I didn't have to be quite as careful to make sure that the brush wasn't too full of paint, because it won't fill as much with paint. But on my other brush that was super full of paint, the water just ran right through there. So I'm going to be painting across this, and as I paint, as long as this isn't too wet, it doesn't run through the fabric itself. It just paints these holes that are left behind, which will then be our dark places in our painting. You can see this a little bit better in those big places where I've done that. Just do a little bit more of it to show you here. Might have to add just a wee touch of water into there. And I could shift it to another color if I wanted to. I was trying purple because I thought maybe my original photograph was with a black board behind this lace. So it was actually black behind there. But I was feeling like maybe a little color might be a nice thing. So actually playing with a couple of different colors in here to see if any of those are more appealing than just a neutral black. And let's try a little bit darker green here as well. That might have been too wet. I could feel it like it might have bled in underneath of there, but we'll see when we pull it off. Okay, I think that's enough to really see what's going on. So I'm just sort of dabbing down on this and pulling the brush across those empty holes and holding the lace with my other hand. Now let's do a little bit of this skinny small hole part of this lace, because I was surprised that it didn't work when I had the brush too wet, but when it's a little drier with this stiff brush, it did a better job. Okay, so let's lift that and see what we've got underneath. There we go. And we're seeing a little bit of texture of that lace behind. So it gets all that pattern of the lace. So the question becomes, do we like that? And if we do we want the lace, do I want to put a pale color on first and then come and do this so that we end up, so it isn't on bright white, because I think bright white's going to be a little too much, but it's sort of nice on this colored bit. But I do like that much better than what happened over here. And this was some more, I actually had, the texture where the lace got a little bit damp on the other side was actually leaving a little texture behind on here, which I'm liking too. So this is the way we can get that lace in the background. So it's really going to be a decision of how much contrast do we want in that lace in the background, and what color do we really want it to be. So that is a big question. But so that I can do that lace without having to fight with my drawing here, I think I'm going to have to mask off the drawing area, the base, maybe not the whole thing, but at least the outer 1 inch of it, so that I can put that lace in back behind there without interfering with what I'm going to do on the bottles, because I can't really see through there well enough to be accurate when I get up to those edges. So I'm going to turn off my my video for the moment, and we're going to get our masking fluid in here. I've put liquid shampoo onto my brush to give it a little soap layer so that the masking fluid doesn't stick as easily. And so I am trying to decide whether I'm going to paint this entire vase, but for sure I'm going to paint the outer edge of it. So I want to be accurate when I do that. I want to be sure that this is going to really show, so I want to be sure that that's accurate. Advantage, disadvantage is that this will pick up some of my pencil marks that I have here. So if I've got the pencils my marks a bit dark at this point, it will be lighter afterwards. And let's pick up that edge there, and that's got just a little fatness to it right at that edge, so let's get that. I had a little extra there, so all right, now. Not sure you necessarily want to watch me painting all of this, although I can speed up the video. We're going to be looking at all the little light and dark shifts as they work their way through this when I go to paint it. And I will be doing it just in pieces because there's so many little hard edges joining things that it's going to be an easy thing to do in pieces, but it means that I can just sort of work my way through all the little shifts and changes without feeling like I've got to pick off too much at once. It's going to be one of these things that it's going to drive me a bit crazy because there's so many little details. And I'm going to bring that up just a touch further than what I had it. The photograph that I took, I just kept the colors very simple, and I suppose I'll do the same in the painting rather than trying to shift colors. But I do feel like I want to do something other than that gray in the back there. It means that it's going to change the color of the reflection in the pot a little bit. And so, you know, do we want to do purple? Do we want to do that little bit of greenish tone that I was playing with? What's going to work good with this sort of goldy color of this cloth and the goldy reflection in here, this blue bottle? So I'm just sort of thinking about it. I want to still keep it pretty much on a neutral color, but not totally neutral black, which would probably be one reason to sort of shift toward sort of a darkish purple, not a bright purple, but a darkish purple. So with this, I'll be able to see where the edge of this is too with the color when we go to put that lace on there and start marking that lace. It's so important that, and you know, I'm actually using a fairly decent brush here. This is one that I picked up for not a whole lot of money at the Exploratorium. So it's not my very best brush, but it's a soft brush, and I can really get a nice line with it. And that's the other reason I want to be very careful about making sure that I put the soap on it before I start. Because if I put the soap on it, then I should be able to wash, if I can get this washed immediately as soon as I finish playing with this. And do we want to have a little bit of, it's sort of like in the photograph that there's actually some bumps in this. It's not perfectly straight. It turns and goes down a little corner here, picks back up and comes into that bottle. So this also gives us an idea of our break between this space and the bottle and that back space and how much room is in each one. I can really see it better now that I'm putting this on here. And, you know, what are these negative shapes looking like between it? I know when we were talking, it was, you know, should we do that as just a plain background? Is that lace going to actually be a distraction, or is it going to add to it? It does add another dimension of something to be reflecting onto that bowl, and that's probably the reason that I put that lace up on there when I took the picture. But is it distracting? So that's the other thing I've got to think about, isn't it? And then there's a little top to that lid. A little top to the lid. Turns around that corner. So these edges are so important because that's what we're going to really see. That round, a little bit of curve as it goes into the shoulder of the bottle. want to bring that up a little bit? Sure, let's bring that up just a little bit. This will pick up a lot of my drawing from underneath. Okay, so I've got more of this in my thing, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this in a little bit further just to use it up. That was what I absolutely had to have. Is that going to maybe get across into there? Got a finger down to try and get that a straight line, and I think I might be making it worse rather than better. Okay, that's pretty good. A little thicker there. Okay, I think we've got it. Let's get this brush washed out immediately. I was debating whether I was going to do this next step on this for this week or if we were going to wait, but let me go ahead and I'm going to do one more step on this painting, and that is this background. So some things for me to think about when I put this background in is how dark do I really want to make it. With it being dark, this light really stands out. This highlight really stands out a lot, but if it's too dark, it has this feeling of dullness, and I also don't like that it's black back behind there. So I think I'm going to come maybe a value or two lighter than it is now, but right now it is surprisingly dark, even on those. Look at how dark that is. It's way up to value 7, which is, all the way, into the darker side of our values. And so we probably could come, see, out in here. Yeah, out in here, we're at value 6. And so, if we go value 5, value 6, and then I come in and do that little dark background marking the way I showed you with that little experiment. So I'm just going to paint this background. My lace was a little bit of an off-white, and I like the fact that this yellowy brown and the bits of yellow that are in here are working against this blue bottle. So we're going to have this yellow, brown versus blue. And so it's a really nice combination, orange and blue being opposite each other on the color wheel, and then going just one little shift. So, orange and blue are opposite each other on the color wheel. But if we go a little shift off to yellowy orange and purple, then we have this little color shift that happens that's really quite nice. And so, this back in here with that dark, some of it could go slightly toward purple, some of it could go slightly toward the orange, and do sort of a little bit of a multicolor mix in there. But first I have to get my base color down, let that dry, and then we'll put the dark lace in. So what I wanted to mix here, this part's going to be fairly loose. I'm going to want to do it with some bigger brushes. I'm working on a 12 by 16 sheet of paper, so I could go up, with this flat brush to put that on, because I want it to go pretty smooth. Although there are some variations, we could get this feeling of a draped curtain a little bit more than what I've got here. But let me go first mix up a sort of an off-white brownish color. And I have a dirty yellow here that had New Gamboge in it, and let's just throw some more New Gamboge in it. so we can lean this brown slightly toward the yellow side. I could have also done this with quinacridone gold. It would have been, it's a little more transparent, maybe it would have been slightly nicer, but I might use that in some of that background. And then I'm going to add burnt sienna to this. And you know, this, I have to have a white pan to mix in so you can sort of see your colors, and I tend to like to pull it up into these edges to sort of look at it and see what that looks like. Now if this is feeling just a little too yellow, I can add just a touch of blue to this and knock it down. So let me, since this is still a light color, let's go into the cobalt blue rather than the ultramarine blue and just add a little bit. Yeah, that's going to tone that down. And then let's try this. Let me try this on a sheet of paper. See if I like that color. Very neutral. That's maybe a little too green. Let me add a little bit more burnt sienna to it. I think I like that a little better. Let's just thin it down even more and see what it looks like thinned. I think that's going to be nice against that blue. I wanted to lean just a little bit more yellowy than what the original was. So now if I want this to go down pretty smooth and pretty uniform over there, wetting my page is going to be my best way to get that down. And that's another reason for doing this masking, is that I can then wet that page and be pretty free with this. I'm going to get my picture out of the way here. And just be careful that I don't wet more than I want to, because there's still a little bit of color in that water. And other places I want to have absolutely white. So just bringing my brush on top of here just a little bit. Make sure it gets all the way up into the corners. So when I wet the paper like this, it's going to automatically thin my paint. And so that's you know, with us wanting to do this pretty thin, it's going to be a good thing, isn't it? And I'm hoping, there's construction going out in front of my house. They've been quiet for the last hour, and I'm hoping that it's going to last for just a little longer, so while we do this. Okay, so this is the darker side, so let me start over there. I like this. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really pretty color to be my, now let's also be looking at this value here. That's pretty light value. I could actually go darker with that. Interesting. Okay, let me add a little bit more burnt sienna into that. And I'm just going to do, you know, because we want this to look like maybe curtains. And so I'm going to just do some vertical lines in there a little bit darker. And this is an area that we want it pretty dark. So let's just bring this down darker into here. Well, I'll have to come back and do a little bit more. And then a little bit of a vertical line somewhere in here. Get some more of this off of my brush because I need to pick up paint over there. Oh, be careful. It's okay if it gets a little bit in there because that's going to be brownish also. Now I can see where it was wet or not now that I've got paint on here. Now we want it to go even darker down into this corner here because of that highlight into the other piece. So let me just get some more burnt sienna, a little bit more of that cobalt blue, make that a little bit darker brown. Is that going to drop off my brush? Okay. And so if I keep this sort of vertical with some light and dark areas, it's going to get that feeling of a curtain. And maybe that runs a little more fat and skinny there. I don't necessarily want, well, that needs to be pretty dark against that edge. So let me just pull that up a little bit. Now I can turn this over so the water wants to run the other way. And I liked this, that there was maybe a little bit of light in the curtain over there. And let me just get a little more blue into this. Feeling of this just being a little darker down in this corner here. And a little darker down in this corner as well. That being a little brush marky uneven, and yeah, let's lift that out of there. I'm getting some splatters down in here, which I don't necessarily want, so let me just rub those out. Okay, anything else I need to do here? Let's get this a little bit darker next to this bottle, because there's actually a beautiful little highlight right on the edge of that bottle. And if I got that a little darker, I can make it show more. But I like this lighter close to that top. And okay, let me just rinse my brush out, think about whether anything else is going to get lifted, and I do want to get a little of this off of here so that when I go to pull that, I don't have as much paint there to pick up onto the resist and get back into the page. That's a little bit thick there. Do we like it? Anything else that I need to do? I'm going to turn it over, let it run the other way. Oops, I've got a big wad of paint right up here. This block is coming off of its back, and I didn't want to tape it just yet, but I will after this round, so that I've got it taped. So I'm going to just turn this so that I can roll this around a little bit here, get some of that paint moving. And then we'll turn it up this way so it tends to run down to this other end of my page. Let those go a little darker right up into that top. And I was thinking that maybe I wanted this a little bit lighter right there. And let's, yeah, just let those. And you know, these curtains come down at a little bit of an angle, so they're not necessarily perfectly. Take that dark up just a wee touch higher here, if I can. Oops. Oops. I've got to get that off of there like right now. Good. Whew. Okay, we're saved. Maybe I don't want this exactly even. I want it just a little bit, even though curtains do tend to be more of an even back and forth. Okay, I think we should just let that be, let that dry, and next week I will put lace on it and we will talk about some of the other things. So for now, I think we've gotten this as far as it's going to. And ooh, here's something else that is going to be visible later, and I don't want it to be. Let's get that cleaned off of there, smoothed out. Okay, that gets it. Thank God for masking fluid, huh? Somebody else is going to be a little bit of a line there. I know there's a little paint on that brush, but as long as I've got it wet, I can come back in on the rag and lift most of that off. Okay, I think, you know, this is probably still, it's going to get darker when we put the that masking fluid on there. Okay, so we're at about value 5 here. I think that's going to be nice because that'll bring it just, it's actually the darkest places there are up to value 6, which is what I wanted. A little bit of value 6 right next to there. And I'm going to turn this again so that then that dark continues rolling back down into there. And I just put a thumbprint up in here. Okay. Thumbprint's gone. an almost dry brush, just a little rub on there because it's still quite, if I look at this from the side, we've got a lot of sheen on here, so I still can work it just a little bit. Okay, gonna turn this off and we will see how it's gonna go.